suicide in particular, because there's such a high suicide rate and all of the tragedies that happen. So we met last year.
Yes.
Introduced to you last year.
Yeah. Didn't we have the Northwell Health?
Northwell
I
Health.
told my dad on
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
On the street day.
Speaking.
Northwell Health last year, well, every year, they have a gun prevention, violence prevention. Webinar.
Yeah, forum, yeah, it's live, yeah, it's live stream, but it's interactive. We watch virtually an event that's occurring in New York City.
You got to go in person this year.
Yes, and I can share with them about that later.
And speak to Julia more.
Yes.
Yep, spokesperson for this whole thing. So anyway, we decided that we wanted them to come here yet again this year. They were here last year, and we thank them for that. This year, there's more of a focus on suicide. So today, we'll have here with us Teresa, and Teresa then. Okay.
Just last year, our presentation was Be Smart presentation, which is a presentation regarding the secure storage of firearms in homes, especially when you have children that visit, or grandchildren that visit you, visit others. It's important when you ask about food allergies and pets in homes, it's important to ask about firearms. So we help normalize that conversation. So we're still available to do that kind of presentation at any time, any place, anywhere. It's free of charge, just that you know.
Very good. So with that, I'm going to let you take over because this is very important.
So again, thank you for having us here today. And I'm Teresa. I'm Ann.
I'm Terry.
And Janet is our lead for Long Island. And we're here to do one thing we can do, talk about this.
I'm sorry. Thank you. We're telling the truth.
Extreme risk protection orders. And before we start, we just want to acknowledge that we'll be talking about some emotional issues, including the topic of suicide. We may have different perspectives or experiences with this issue. I just want to take a few minutes to just agree about a few things. That there's nothing more important than the health and safety of our families and our community. Obviously, that's why we're here. Everyone encounters difficult times. There's nothing shameful if you or someone you love is experiencing signs of risk or a crisis. And family and friends are often in a good position to recognize signs of crisis in our loved ones. And we, more than anyone, want to protect them from harm. So, that's that.
Okay, so we never want to think about someone we love harming themselves. It's an upsetting and scary thought. But if someone in our family or our household is struggling, it's often the people closest to them who can see the signs first. We're also more attuned to the situations that can cause an emotional crisis to ramp up, like financial difficulties, severe medical diagnosis, relationship issues.
Some telltale signs of someone who's going through a difficult time include depression, agitation, quick temper, trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, increased use of alcohol or drugs, aggressive or even violent behavior, and threatening to hurt themselves or others. Now, every person is different, and not everyone exhibits the same behavior if they're going through something tough. So if you are noticing signs of risk in your loved one, you can start by taking a few steps to reach out and connect with the person. Try inviting an honest conversation, listening and supporting your loved one, and encouraging him or her to seek a mental health professional or a primary care physician. However, if you've taken those steps and the person doesn't seem receptive to help, especially if they're starting to talk or behave in ways that are dangerous to themselves or others, you are right to be concerned. And when signs of crisis become so severe that you are worried for your loved one's safety, there's one important thing you should ask yourself.
Does your loved one have access to a gun? Before we talk about why this question is so crucial, we want to acknowledge that there are millions of responsible gun owners across the country, and certainly many in our own community. Choosing whether to own a gun is a personal decision. However, when someone is in crisis, access to a gun can make a difficult situation very dangerous, even fatal. We want to talk specifically about this danger in relation to the risk of suicide.
So, first, there are two important things we want to communicate to you about firearm suicide. First is how tragically prevalent it is in the United States. You may not know this, but suicides account for nearly 6 out of 10 gun deaths in the U.S. every year. Now, specifically in New York, the rate of gun suicide has decreased by 19% compared to the national 73% increase. In an average year, 450 people die by guns. So nationwide, we have a rate of 2.1 deaths by suicide, gun suicide, per 100,000 people. And New York, our state, has the 4th lowest rate of gun suicide deaths in the U.S.
So the second thing we want to talk about is some of the facts about firearm suicide. It's uniquely lethal. Any other attempted suicide with any other means doesn't always have to lead to death. With suicide with a firearm, almost always leads to death. And sometimes when a person has an opportunity to rethink their choices, they might not make that choice again. But once they've used that firearm, there's no second chance, and there's no thinking through whether or not there's another way out of whatever the situation is.
Here's Andrea, a gun violence survivor, sharing her story and the reason why it's vital for those able to petition for an extreme risk protection order to be educated on these red flag laws.
Before I show the video, I just want to explain a little bit about Andrea. Andrea's from Brooklyn, and she is one of the members of our Everytown Survivor Network. Within Moms Demand Action in Everytown, we have our public education, we have our advocacy, and a lot of things that we do. But to me, one of the most important things that we do is we support our survivors. So a lot of our survivors have foundations or funds in the name of their loved one that they lost to gun violence. And so throughout the year, we do various events with them, and we just support them by being there and being at the admission table or handing out flyers or just supporting them in any way we can. And we'll get into a little bit of that later on because a couple of our survivors are here in Suffolk County. We're in Suffolk County? No, we're in Madison County. Sorry. 10 minutes outside of this meadow, I'm lost. Outside of my driveway, I'm lost. We're still in Madison? Yes. No, that's not Madison County. That's what it was last time I was on the North Shore. That's what it was. We have different events throughout the year for different survivors. Some who've lost their loved ones to community violence on our own streets that are not sensationalized in the news, and others who are very well known because of their family members who died in the Parkland shootings or whatever it happens to be. So we do whatever we can for all communities, and we try to get into as many communities as we can, especially those disproportionately impacted by gun violence. So this is Andrea.
Hi, I'm Andrea Murray, and I live in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a member of the Everytown Survivor Network, and I volunteer with the New York City chapter of Moms Demand Action. As you probably know, 120 Americans are killed with guns every day. The media covers the horrible mass shootings that are far too common. But did you know that 6 of every 10 gun deaths in the United States are suicide? Because of the shame associated with suicide, most of us aren't aware just how common it is. I was at an event recently where I mentioned that as a survivor of gun suicide, I'd be speaking at a fundraiser for gun violence prevention. The woman next to me shared that she had also lost her father to gun suicide. When my dad was 67, he suffered from chronic pain and struggled with pain management. One day, he sent my uncle, his younger brother, an email that was basically a suicide note. My uncle lived in Washington State, and when he couldn't reach my dad, he called my sister in California. She reached out to my dad's local sheriff's department and asked them to do a wellness check. When the officers arrived, they found my dad. watching TV next to a loaded gun. Following their training, the officers talked to my dad, determined he was at risk to himself, and took him to the hospital for a 72-hour psych hold. The doctors were able to get my dad's pain under control, and they released him after 3 days. Minnesota's Extreme Risk Protection Order law went into effect at the beginning of 2024, but they didn't have one in 2008. Although we knew that my dad was at risk of suicide, there was no legal option for us to remove his access to firearms. So, on May 29th, 2008, my brother came home from work and found our dad dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. I lost my dad because one day things felt like too much. Because 85 to 90% of suicide attempts with a firearm are fatal, that one bad day was my dad's last day. Half of all suicides in the US are by firearm, and the risk of suicide is greater when a firearm is present and accessible in the home. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention says that the best way to protect a person in distress is to temporarily remove all lethal means, including firearms, from the home until that person is no longer in a state of crisis. Without access to a gun, research shows that most people in suicidal crisis won't simply find another way to kill themselves. Eliminating access to firearms allows time both for the moment of intense suicidal crisis to pass and for someone to intervene with potentially life-saving support and resources. Red flag laws like New York's allow family members, teachers, healthcare providers, and law enforcement to petition to have guns removed from the home of someone who is at risk to themselves or others. It also prevents someone at risk from purchasing a gun. But it's not enough just to have a red flag law. We have to implement it. We have to educate individuals, teachers, healthcare providers, and law enforcement on how they can use that law to save the lives of our loved ones. Being able to remove my dad's guns from his house might have given him time for his crisis to pass. He might have lived to see his granddaughter get her PhD, and he could have taught his 2 great-grandsons the Blathnum dance that I loved so much as a child. And he could have been at my wedding. Remember the woman I met at that event? Her mother had stopped her father from killing himself once. So he waited until she was out of the house to use his gun to take his life. If she'd been able to remove his gun from the house after that first attempt, chances are good she would have saved his life. Just like we might have been able to save my dad. Along with things like background checks and safe gun storage, red flag laws can go a long way toward preventing not just gun suicide, but all forms of gun violence. Thank you.
I just want to clarify one thing that you said about the law enforcement and social workers and teachers. The law has been expanded, so if a neighbor if someone has a neighbor who they also think is going through a temporary emotional crisis and knows that there are firearms in their home, they can call. We always encourage people to call law enforcement before you take on the process yourself. We're going to explain the process, but there is a fee attached to petitioning for an ARPO, but extreme risk protection order. But the state now New York State has now a process where you can avoid having to pay that fee. But it's still always the best bet to call law enforcement first. Those are moms also back there. Sorry.
So, if you're in a situation where you see your loved one struggling, you fear that they are in danger of harming themselves, you continue to take the steps mentioned earlier, yet you can't seem to reach them,
There's one thing you can do to protect them. Prevent them from getting their hands on a gun until the crisis passes. And fortunately, if you feel there is an urgent need to temporarily remove a gun from your home and to prevent your loved one from gaining access to a gun, there's a tool that can help, and it's called
Extreme Risk Protection Order. We interchange, we call it ERPO, acronym, Extreme Risk Protection Order. It's similar to the order of protection, but this involves guns only. And we're going to go through the entire process of it. We also call it red flag laws because that's the slang word that people use for it. So we try to interchange it so people are aware that if they ever hear about it on the news or if they ever feel that they need to research this further or find some information, which we actually have a lot of information that you're welcome to take home with you. So we interchange extreme risk protection order with red flag laws and the word ERPO.
Let me give you a quick overview of what an extreme risk protection order is and how it works. First, it's designed to help family and/or law enforcement keep a person at risk of harming themselves or others from having access to a gun until the crisis passes. It's an order that's issued by a court if someone is found to be at significant risk for harming themselves or someone else. It temporarily prohibits the person from possessing or purchasing guns, again, until the crisis passes. And it requires any firearms the person has to be temporarily held by law enforcement while the order remains in effect.
Extreme risk protection orders, red flag laws, are designed to help make a potentially dangerous situation safer while still respecting the rights of an individual. Before we go into detail, we know that it's a lot to take in. And all the information we're about to go through is available at the website onethingyoucando.org. Some important things to understand about extreme risk protection orders are: they can be put to use quickly to provide emergency intervention. They are temporary. They respect due process. The extreme risk protection order is a civil order. The court's decision to issue one does not result in a criminal record. Finally, and this is a very important point, the issuing of an extreme risk protection order does not rely on mental health diagnosis.
So the person does not have to have an actual medical diagnosis.
So extreme risk protective orders have been effective in getting guns away from people in throes of dangerous crisis. And we have a few examples, nationwide examples. I chose two which are from New York State. In 2024 in Akron, New York, these are things that actually happened, an extreme risk protection order was filed at the Akron Central School District against a middle school student who made threats to kill himself, his parents, and members of his school. According to these documents, the student's parents had 5 rifles in their home. This is a situation, a real situation that happens, that can be deterred with an extreme risk protection order or a temporary extreme risk protection order. Another one is in 2023 in Baldwinsville, New York. A temporary extreme risk protection order was issued after a 14-year-old brought a handgun to school and threatened to shoot a teacher. The student was arrested and charged with making a terroristic threat. Weapons from the student's home were turned over by the student's parents and secured by the police. So that's another situation, a real situation that was prevented with an extreme risk protection order.
And I think at this point it's important to note that this is really pretty drastic to do something like this, especially if it's a loved one. But when you think about it, it can be potentially life-saving. So, although you don't want to go to this extreme, to take the firearm away, you go to an extreme to save your family's lives or a member of your family's life. So when there are strong signs of being at risk, this is an opportunity to save the lives. And as drastic as it may seem, I know we go to the ends of the earth for anyone that we loved or any of our some of our neighbors. All of our neighbors. But it's an important step to take. And the easiest step is to call the police, and they will handle it. You give them the information that you have, and it has help in certain situations. But if you feel that you want to, we're going to go over the steps of how it actually works.
Go ahead.
Now we'll go through how it works in our state, because states are all. And again, all this information is available at onethingyoucando.org. So don't feel like you need to commit it to memory, because it's in a crisis, you might not remember any of this. Here are the basic steps to seeking an extreme risk protection order. Contact a member of law enforcement and discuss your concerns with them so that they can help you navigate the process and seek the order from the court. Under New York law, a law enforcement officer, certain types of licensed healthcare providers, school personnel at the person's school, or person's family or household member may file a petition for an extreme risk protection order. The full list of household members and healthcare providers, again, is available on the onethingyoucando.org site. If you don't fall into one of those categories, you can go to law enforcement if you are concerned about someone. In either case, you will need to share why you believe the person may pose a significant risk to themselves or others, which may include recent behaviors or threats of violence or other warning signs that we discussed. In a crisis situation, the court can issue an emergency order that would immediately suspend access to firearms until the hearing can be held. If they currently own any firearms, those would be held by law enforcement for as long as the extreme risk protection order is in effect. The court will schedule a hearing no later than 6 days after the order is granted.
The court sets a hearing date. At that hearing, the court evaluates whether a final extreme risk protection order is needed. And the person who is the subject of the order also has the opportunity to contest the order. If a final extreme risk protection order is issued, the person is prohibited from possessing guns for the duration of the order, which lasts for 1 year.
I ask a question, because I'm trying to get the sequence. If you feel there's a risk, you talk to law enforcement or you talk to the court.
You can go to the court.
But you said that an order gets issued and then there's a hearing. Is the weapons confiscated during that period?
Yes.
As soon as it's, so the police or whoever are going to take the
Yes,
weapons.
temporarily, and hold
Figure
them
out
in
what's
precinct.
going on and then, okay.
Yes,
I get that, that's a little
I mean, it's
scary.
a week or two later, and if the guy's going to do
Yeah,
something, he's got a wait to do what he's got to do.
Yeah, a lot can happen in 6 days.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, until that process goes through, the guns are temporarily
They're
removed and
temporary.
held in the precinct
Yeah.
of that
And
person.
police responsibility.
Yes. Thank you.
So here, maybe this will, as we go along, we'll get a little. So the final order is issued, and the biggest benefit of an extreme risk protection order is that it temporarily prevents someone who is in the midst of a potential dangerous crisis from getting their hands on that gun. Once the order is issued, the person has the time and space to get the help and support they need to move past that crisis. If the person continues to show signs that they may be at risk of harming themselves or someone else, the order can be renewed. The renewal of the order requires another hearing where the court must hear evidence as to why the person should be temporarily restricted from having guns. Once the order expires or is terminated by the court, the person will get their firearms back and or will be able to legally buy and access and possess guns again. This does not, we want to emphasize this because it does not result, this the issuing of an extreme risk protection order does not result in a criminal record. It has no attachment to that. It's just, the reason for it is to prevent access in a crisis. And I just want to also say, if you go to New York, the NewYorkState.gov, you can find the whole process with forms on that site.
Downloadable forms.
You can download forms, you can go through it with more details. There's a lot of statistics too, if you want to just see what's happening around you. We have some QR codes at the table too, if you want to get interested. But it does not, this order does not result in a criminal record.
And it's very important for people to know that. Thank you. So in July, I think it was, of 2022, the previous administration passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was the largest pack of gun violence prevention bills passed in forever. And there were 4 basic things. It supports these extreme risk protection order laws in different states. And gives funding for them so that people can be educated as well as go through the system a little bit easier. It strengthened background check system. So background check system was only for stores selling guns, not private dealers and others. So this strengthened the background check system. Also lowered the age for background checks. We call them violence interrupters. There's many community violence intervention programs. Out here there's STRONG, SNUG, New Yorkers Against Gun Violence. There's a bunch of them that work just to interrupt gun violence. And we work with many of them. We have community partners and we work with them in many of our events that we have. But most importantly, money is going into these programs. Because a lot of these programs are obviously in communities more heavily impacted by gun violence, and they don't necessarily always have the funding that they need to do something about interrupting gun violence. And last, funding school safety resources, which is educating parents about secure storage, educating parents about these kinds of things. So this has done a tremendous amount to fund states and help states for the gun violence prevention.
We all want to keep our families safe and healthy. The extreme risk protection order gives you the ability to do something about a situation that seems to be spinning out of control. It gives you the power to intervene during a potentially dangerous time and keep your loved one from getting their hands on a gun until that crisis passes. It gives you, the person who knows your loved ones the best, a tool to protect their safety and their rights and potentially save their life.
Here are some various resources where further information can be obtained. This information is also on the handouts we have with us.
Can I just, the 988 is the new suicide hotline, and my husband is a social worker, said, be sure you tell people, because Veterans Affairs are being cut right now, 988-1 is specifically for veterans.
Okay.
988 and then 1. Are you a veteran?
No.
Okay, so, thank you everybody for listening. We appreciate your time, and if you want to ask any questions, we're here, or...
And thank you, Heather, once again. You know, I just want to...
Wonderful commitment.
Yes. So when we were speed dating a year ago, at the end of the Gun Violence Prevention Forum, we were on virtually, and you had like 3 minutes with the person, and then another person showed up and took your face. Peg and I stood in front of each other, and within minutes, we connected, and she wanted to bring our message out to you here, and hopefully further beyond that. So that's why our connection has been wonderful, and have given us the opportunity to share the Be Smart message as well as now the One Thing You Can Do message. But we have the ability to travel anywhere on Long Island to share it with. We've presented school districts, temples, churches, civic organizations. We've done museums, right? That's right, museums, children's museums. Where we had parents come. We've also, some of the local state Senator Kevin Thomas had us do a gun violence prevention town hall virtually during the pandemic. Assemblywoman Taylor Darling had us do a gun violence training forum with the local police department, and we are pushing right now, and they're very agreeable to us with some of the newer novice assembly members and state senators. So we're getting our message out as much as we can. Libraries, we present at libraries. Right, Illinois.
To the NAACP too.
That's right, NAACP.
Yeah,
we did present it.
It's a platform.
Yeah. One of the biggest things that we have come up against is, well, I'm from Nassau, and I know we are now in Suffolk. Suffolk County has, over the past couple of years since the implementation of red flag laws in New York State, have implemented red flag laws in over 1,000 cases. I don't have the exact number, over 1,000 cases.
So much so that it's a nationwide example.
Leader, the governor has held up Suffolk County, right, as a nationwide leader, the statewide leader. And Nassau County had 32. So it could be on the records forever, but if you don't implement it, it doesn't mean anything. So we actually had Seth Coslow, one of the Nassau County legislators, fighting for us to train the cadets in the Nassau County Police Department on ERPO, because they're not used to all of the laws, right? So, yeah, we were in the process that got stopped temporarily, but we're waiting to see if we're welcome. You'll keep pushing. And so,
Keep it alive, keep alive the conversation.
yeah, so we're working as hard as we can to make sure that police officers, we were able to get through every town or parent organization a palm card that police officers can keep in their patrol cars, which goes over the basic steps of our vote, because they don't know all the laws when they're out there doing what they do so courageously every day. But so now they have a palm card, a digital palm card as well, so that they have this whole process at their fingertips when needed. So we keep working whatever way we can to make sure that we can help save lives. If you have any questions, please feel free.
First, thank you for being here. Phrase that came to mind that I've heard before is, it's better to have somebody angry than dead.
Yep. Yes.
And I just wanted to throw in that law enforcement will also respond if it's not a gun issue, but the person wants to kill themselves.
Yes.
I've done that before. I'm a mandatory reporter, and I've called before and had, someone was going to throw herself in front of the train. I knew exactly the train, couldn't get there. Officers were there, they prevented the suicide. So
yes.
they will respond. It doesn't have
they
to
always,
be,
yes.
It doesn't have to be like, they don't
right.
have to be like, oh, no gun.
Right. Exactly. And if you don't know, then they don't know to respond. If
right.
they don't know that there are, a plethora of medications in the house because someone is using medications for illnesses, they don't know that there's a threat in the house. So yes, whether it's, kitchen knives or medication or a firearm, it's important to, yeah.
And when talking to someone, and most of us know this, it's important to ask the question, do you want to kill yourself? And second, do you have a plan?
Yes.
And then if you're over your head, you've got to then report it to someone else. But those are if you're afraid that might be the case, who cares if they're mad at you? Ask the question.
Right.
That's those two questions.
Right.
And
as fast
how serious
as
it
it
is.
is. Exactly.
Yeah. You can't put it in somebody's mind by asking the question.
Correct.
And the idea of taking the guns or access to, as John said, knives and medication, is hopefully that person will be able to get the help that they need in that time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going, if there's no other questions, we're going to walk around a little bit, and if you have something you want to ask or say, please feel free. Thank you so much.